Thank you very much for this quick greetings. And I think it was really a good transition because you are talking about sharing knowledge. And of course, this is something that is very important for us. And we need to do the monitoring of the coastal areas in West Africa. And this was done by the Dakar Ecologic Follow-up Center, the CSE, and we are trying to put various 5-year plans. So I think it would be exactly very good to give the floor to Dr. Mbow, who is the director of the Centre de Suivi Écologique, the Ecologic Follow-up Center in Dakar, Senegal, in order to explain what he is doing in his center, especially in the sediment management in his region. You have the floor. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Christopher, the moderator, also, I would like to thank him because we are able to have this presentation for 15 minutes, especially in the sediment transport and the sediment management in West Africa. I am introducing myself. My name is Cheikh Mbow. I'm the director of the Centre de Suivi Écologique, the Ecological Follow-up Center, the CSE, and I've been working here for 20 years in those coastal issues with the leadership of Dr. Moussa Sall. I think everybody knows him and other colleagues who have for many years followed and monitored many projects in the Senegal coastal areas and the West African coastal areas. I said just beforehand, I could just follow the Senegal government in 2011 for the management of Senegal Western coast, and that was with the help and the aid of JICA, that is to say the Japanese agencies. We were in Niigata, in Yokohama, and in other areas in Japan in order to see what was being done in Japan. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank again the Japanese government for this technology transfer that made it possible for us to do things here in sediment management in my countries. You can see on the slide some areas that are really very interesting. Many biodiversity is here. You have a lot of economic challenges also because you have a lot of population living in there, and therefore there are many challenges that are human and biophysical as well. And we all know that we are working in the climate change context, and especially we have the rise of the sea level, and we can see that in many places deltas are going down, and therefore we have a lot of erosion, and we will have some damages that are going to have consequences for the nature, but also the human societies. And this is why the sediment management is something that is very important. I would like to share my ideas. I hope that this can be the way to continue thinking about it, and I hope it will help also in the West African Monitoring Center also further debates. So first of all, I would like to talk about governance of coastal and sediment management in Western, but I think it is important to try to find measures that we can do for prevention, because we have to be beforehand, really, before you have problems. And very often we don't do that. We have a tendency to see the problem, and then when the issue is there, we try to find a solution. But I think we should think more about prevention. And when we do that, when we are just post reacting, very often there are very bad results. Second thing that is very important is to have a monitoring. I told you about the monitoring center, and this is very important, to have methodologies to monitor things, to follow the situation. And try to understand what the sediment dynamics are. If we are only doing solutions, we don't know it. And it is important not to be just in one country, but really on the whole region and also the whole continent, because everything has consequences on the coastal areas. And then you can do policy guidelines, for example, or collaborations only when you have a real data and monitoring in place. So our center, the CSU, is the very first institution that was accredited by the World Bank and other institutions. And because we had those accreditations, we could do a lot of coastal management in Western Africa. In the picture, you can see me. I'm on the breakwater of the Sali area in Senegal. We were accompanying the Senegal government to put breakwaters, that is to say, to stabilize erosion. And we managed to do that in this coastal area. And it had a lot of impact on the touristic import. As you might know, in Senegal, tourism is the second industry with many employment for the population. So it was very important to be able to manage the sediment transport in this, and this has enabled to have more tourists come in this area. So of course, this, as you have this economic impact that is very important, but also there is the whole history of this sub-region, the cemeteries or other areas. It has sometimes some religious meaning also. We don't want to have those things that just go to the ocean. It can be cemeteries, it can be traditional areas and stone graves or mosques that are here. And these are areas that are very important for the communities, and they are in danger of disappearing, going into the ocean. So it is important also for the community links to manage sediment is also to have an impact on the social communities. In this slide, I would like only to show the importance of dynamics on the continental level. With drought that have been reinforced in the 50 years past, we have almost big droughts every 2-3 years now, and therefore we had to find some solutions to fight this climate changes, and we set up, for example, dikes here in order to manage this, because there has been also a lot of deforestation that had impact also on the erosion situation. So many sediments were going elsewhere, not always in the oceans, in the sea. So because the lowlands also got those sediments, and therefore it was not possible to go to the ocean. And you had a lot of vegetation that came here, and that was not necessarily good vegetation. So it wasn't very good for culture or agriculture. Those areas were not usable anymore. And the low-lying areas had less and less water also, because you had a lot of water plants coming in, and therefore you had also some problems with fisheries. It was not possible to fish anymore. So there was a real problem and real issues with the economy in those regions. So we had to put in place an integrated sediment management program in order to understand really what was going on and to improve the situation. As you can see here, the coastal dynamics are really going very rapidly and changing the situation. And then you have the climate change that has a lot. Mangrove is also deteriorated, and many initiatives that were put in place with protection walls actually didn't work correctly because it wasn't adapted to the situation. So right now we are trying to find a new soft solutions, so to find solutions for these sediment issues. It is very complex, and it is not just for coastal areas. It is really a process that is for the whole coastal area that goes really into the continent, several kilometers inland. And this is why it is important. So erosion is actually continuing. It's not just for the natural or climate changes, but also because you have people that are developing there. You have human populations that are coming in, and you are also extracting sand in order to build buildings. And this has also an impact on the balance, the ecological balance, environmental balance of this area. Now, as far as the infrastructure is concerned, inland, of course, you have many small dams. For example, in Morolan, you have also this. This is quite inland, this dam, and it stops the sediments that were coming from the shelf, and it was actually taking some rich soil to the farming land, and unfortunately they are not going anymore there. Because of those dams, the water stops, of course, but you also stop many sediments, and there are no possibilities to do better dredging and have this soil going more down the river. So we can see also that the sediment is very important because it enriches the soils. So sometimes we have to understand what those sediments are doing, what are the solutions that we can do really upstream in order to have no problems downstream. Very often it wasn't well understood when we set up the dams, and actually now we are seeing that. Everybody knows that, of course. When we were in Japan, we were talking about the 1950s Olympic Games, where in order for Japan, they had to take a lot of sediments from rivers, and then afterwards they found out that it was very important for the Tokyo Bay area, and actually that was a mistake. So it's exactly the same thing here at the dam of Diama, the Diama Dam. It's very important for the river. Unfortunately, the transport, the sediment transfer is not being done correctly. Also, if you look at the picture on the right side, you have a lot of infrastructure on the coastal areas, and that is here to stop the sand, but the sand cannot be included in the natural sediment transport and the longshore transport. So this is why it is important to take everything into account, because when you put a solution in place, it should not have any impact, negative impact on another side. So the impact is, of course, social, it's economic, it's also emotional, and we all know what happened at Sally, and I will come back on this example because it is we had at one area where there was a whole area that was disappearing, and a lot of investments were just lost because we did not manage correctly the sediment when we had at the Saint Louis breach we had at this area, and it has actually opened completely. So the areas were just completely disappeared into the sea, and it had a lot of social and economic impact. And also at the Saint-Gobain strip of land, it started in 1987. In 92, 93 already, the installations, the facilities that were on it had disappeared in the ocean. And what you can see is that this area, the sediment are going at Dinoir, this area, so that the river circulation has changed, and the economic activities, that is to say the oyster and the fisheries, have disappeared also in this area, unfortunately. Here you have another map. I made this map with the OECD at a workshop. We took the database of dams that were existing in West Africa, and we could count almost 200 dams. And if you update it, actually, it's more than 400 or 450 that are actually set up in the West African area. And the quality of sediment is hundreds of billions of cubic meter. So if you do not manage it all together in a comprehensive manner, then you will not be able to do it. If you have some problems also with the rainfalls also, it will do other problems. So the impact is really important on fisheries, on marine resources, etc. And then this slide, I love this one because it shows where the sediments are coming from. Sometimes come from the wind, the A2 area that comes from actually from the wind transport, but then you have a lot of yields that comes from rivers, especially from Guinea-Bissau to the Sierra Leone. This is the area which is the southern part of rivers. You have several basins that takes a lot of sediments in those areas. So if you put a lot of dams in this area, the impact upstreams will be very bad. And then if you go down on the Togo and Benin, it will also have some impacts there. And of course, there is a lot of erosion in this area. This has nothing we should be astonished about, because everything, all those rivers have a lot of dams here and there, and therefore the sediment yields just is not able to do that. So you have other areas, but at other areas, for example, in the A3 in Senegal or A2, there is absolutely no activity there. So here there is not a lot of erosion maybe, but in Mauritania, you have some ports that have been built. For example, for Nouakchott harbor has actually had consequences on the Senegal coast because of the construction of this Nouakchott port. So each area has impact on areas more south of it, and therefore it is important to have a real regional approach. Now, I would like to come back on the Saint-Louis breach problem, because when we talk about sediment, we have also some extreme phenomena that what happened? Actually, the Senegal River, it has two dams in Jama and Diamé, and we know that the peak is always in August and September, and during several years, we had very high level in September's. And what happened is that in September 2003, this is in red, this high tide was really high, and it was very difficult to stop the water here. We had to have a flow of water, otherwise it would be very important, but we knew also it had impact downstream. So in 2003, in September, we decided that we should stop the breach here. We did it at the beginning of October. Of course, the water went down very rapidly, but then we have consequences that we are still knowing here. So that's 20 years that we have to manage the consequences of this extreme phenomenon that we did not predict in our models. So when we think about sediment management, to really integrate all those extreme phenomena, especially when in area where the river balance had been already not in a clear area. And just before ending, I would like rapidly to show you this slide, which shows that it's not just the sediment transport, it's also the management of many things, including pollution, for example, water pollution, because if you are losing sediment in one area, it means that the whole ecosystem will have some negative impact. When you set up, for example, infrastructures or harbors or dams, it will have consequences. If you use also sediment for construction, it will also have consequences. So all these are issues that we have to think. We need to have the big picture in order to understand everything, in order to know where the links are, in order to find the adequate solutions. As far as the follow-up, what should we do? I know everybody, there are many things to do to, for example, do some current movement analysis, to do some morphometric variation of sand, to do a lot of bathymetric surveys, etc. So this is why we had to set up this monitoring center, and with the help of IUCN, and I think we can also do some good results. Thank you. That there are many lessons that we could draw from that, and we have to understand that we should set up a better organization for that with our institutions. But of course, it is a very complex issue, and there are not perfect any solutions. We always try to mitigate the impacts. Of course, we cannot just find perfect solutions, but always mitigation. This is, Mr. Moderator, what I wanted to say in my presentation, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr.